Now we're going to start looking at different ways that our memories are less than perfect. Part of the way that they are imperfect is that we don't always know when our recollections are correct or not. So please take a moment to read over the slide. A feeling of knowing doesn't mean you will actually be able to recall the material. And I think a lot of us have that experience where we feel like we're going to know something and be able to remember it, and then we can't retrieve it. But feeling of memory is very helpful in encouraging us to search for information in our memory, or to give up from the very beginning and say, there's no way in the world I have any memory of that. Your book has a nice example of the question, what is the largest department store in Russia? Most of us would probably just say, I don't know, and not bother searching our memories for that information. So take a moment and take a look at meta memory and just sort of think about what it means, and maybe think of a term that's an analogy. You might think of it as memory of memory, for example. And it's important to make note that our feeling of knowing doesn't mean that something is being accurately remembered. Just because you are sure that you recall something does not make it true. Some memory errors are the result of implicit memory problems. The false fame study is one example. Just reading a made-up person's name can later on lead us to think that the name belongs to a famous person. First, participants were given one list, list 1. There were no famous names on this. They just read through the list. Later on, they were asked to rate how famous people on a second list of names were. The list included real famous people as well as fictitious people. In some situations, participants rated the fictitious names, the fake names from list 1, as if they were famous. Another memory error related to implicit memory is what's called the illusion of truth. Imagine you read that Gail Logan says that crocodiles sleep with their eyes open. Just like reading a name can lead us to believe the name belongs to a famous person, reading a statement can lead us to believe that the statement is true. This happens even when we are specifically informed that the statement is false. Similarly, when people are warned about possible dangers from a medication, they may falsely believe the medication was actually good for them later on. The way you think about information when you store it has an effect on what sort of retrieval cue will be useful in helping you recall that information later. So think of whether you'll be asked to make a list or to compare details of items from a list. Do you study for essay questions a little bit differently than if you are expecting a definition to be on the exam? If so, you probably have a sense that how you study can influence whether you are able to answer a multiple choice question versus an essay question. You may try to connect a concept or a term with a key phrase to help you with multiple choice questions, but you may feel that you need to be able to elaborate more about a concept if you expect it will be part of an essay question. Just like the way you study can influence how you remember something, where and in what state you study can influence your memory of the information. The context we learn something in can become an effective cue for retrieving that information later on. This is called context-dependent retrieval. Your mood can also be an important influence on recall. We tend to recall happy, episodic memories when we feel happy, but when we are sad, we tend to recall sad events more. Even the feelings created by alcohol or caffeine can become connected to information so that we actually remember it better when we are again under the influence of the alcohol or caffeine. This is state-dependent retrieval. With alcohol, obviously, there are limits to being too intoxicated to remember much. If you remember something, does that mean it happened? Absolutely not. Researchers interviewed nearly 200 people in Amsterdam several months after a plane crash in the city. When asked if they had seen footage of the plane crash on television, over half of the participants reported that they did. However, no such film exists. In later follow-ups, many participants confidently provided details about the crash scene that, of course, they had never seen. What is going on? Can you think of a reason that people would remember seeing footage of the plane crash when they couldn't have? Maybe other memories, other plane crashes that they had seen possibly could have been mixed up with their memory of this one. Here's another example of memory being less than accurate. In one study, participants who had been asked to wait in an office later on recalled seeing books and other items typical of an office, even though those were never present.
In the next segment, we'll start trying to figure out how these mistakes happen.